Good morning and welcome back to another Eduro Learning Live Facebook. And today our topic is helping parents understand your connected classroom. So we've been talking a lot about how you can connect yourself, how you can connect your class, basically how you can bring an digital element to your classroom where kids are learning from each other and from you, both during the class session and beyond the class session. And that can also potentially mean that global reach of having an authentic audience for your kids where they're sharing their learning in digital spaces so that others can learn with them and comment and share and be a part of that learning experience. As usual, I have my notes over here. So you might see me look down into the side. That's because that's where my notes are. As you're embarking on this digital classroom and you're starting to share student learning in online spaces, you might find that parents are concerned about what you're doing, rightfully so, because it's very different from perhaps the way that they learned when they were in school. So today's session is all about how to help them understand what you're doing and why you're doing it in this kind of connected learning environment. So I have 5 steps. They are not necessarily to be completed in this order. It's just kind of the way that I thought about it when I was thinking about how I go about connecting my classroom and helping parents feel really comfortable and confident and excited about what I'm doing. So take these 5 kind of with a grain of salt that they maybe don't need to be in this particular order. It may depend on what works best for you. And I'll talk a little bit about that as I talk about each of the steps. So the first thing that I think is really critical is keeping your parents informed, because we get super excited, we want to do these things, and we kind of get started and we forget that maybe parents don't actually know what's going on and why we're doing it, and that's really important. So that step 1 is keeping your parents informed, and doing it via just a letter home is a really great way to start. And the way I've always done it is an actual paper letter. I mean, maybe an email might be best for your parent community, but I like the idea of a printed letter that has some background about what is the project that we're doing, what is the learning that's going to go involved into this project, like what are kids going to learn about content-based, academic-wise, and also in that kind of digital context. And how is that learning going to happen? Like what tools are we going to use? What does that mean for their learning both in classroom and at home? What kind of permission do you need from parents kind of in this process of designing this digital classroom? I think it's really important in this letter home that you might want to include, if your school has a responsible use policy that students have already signed. So there's a reminder that your child already knows about kind of digital citizenship and safe and responsible, respectful behavior online. This is what they signed. This is what you signed. Robin is pointing out that in the first week of school, a letter should go home. And this can be that exact letter. Or you might decide after a couple of weeks that you want to start this, so you're doing it kind of mid-year. So I've done this letter home in lots of different ways. It's been the first letter that goes home, but also like maybe my classroom wasn't digital at the beginning of the year and I only decided to do it partway through the year, then that letter can go home. The idea is that the letter addresses both the academic learning that's going to happen, why it's important for your child's learning, and then also what they're going to do and how that's going to happen. So that's step 1, is that letter home, keeping your parents informed. Step 2, I think, is developing with your students some class guidelines of how they're going to interact with each other in these digital spaces, how it reflects the values and behaviors of your face-to-face learning environment in a digital space. And I think it's really important that those guidelines come from your students. And of course, we've all had lots of conversations with students where we can kind of adjust what they're thinking based on how we rephrase what they're saying and kind of, push the conversation in a certain direction. But I think the more that you can have these class guidelines come directly from students, the more authentic they will be, obviously, and the more invested your students will be in maintaining these class guidelines. So develop those class guidelines with your students that focus, I think, mostly on behavior and responsibility and respectful interactions in digital spaces, but it can go in any direction that seems appropriate for you. And then again, share those guidelines with parents. So maybe you sent that letter home in step 1, now step 2, you make these class guidelines with your kids, send those guidelines home to parents too, so they know that students are thinking about these things and making it a priority within your classroom. Step 3 is creating that digital space, that teacher website or teacher blog or whatever you're going to use to keep parents informed about the learning that's happening in your classroom. And this is why I mentioned that I wouldn't necessarily do them in this order, because lots of teachers would feel more comfortable creating the digital space first, then sending the letter home with a link to the digital space. But really, whatever works for you, whatever kind of process fits best with your class environment, that's totally fine. On that teacher, Robin, I see your question. I want to go back to your question. I'm going to finish step 3 and then go back to your question. On that teacher blog or teacher website, I would think of it as like a central resource for sharing, including pictures and video as appropriate of learning that's happening in the classroom, highlighting learning goals that are going on in your classroom, what you're trying to achieve with your kids and how they're kind of getting there, what are the experiences that they're having, inviting comments and feedback, asking parents, asking students to leave comments in this space to kind of start that digital conversation. And then if you want to, any of these kind of website tools use something called RSS, which allows parents to subscribe to get all the updates automatically to them. And if you wanted to, you could actually subscribe parents to your updates. So I've done it before where I've had a class blog and I've wanted parents to be getting the updates every time I write them. So I tell the parents, I'm going to automatically subscribe you to this. You will get an email every time. If you don't like it, there will be a link right within that email to unsubscribe, and you never have to see that email again. So just to recap, step 1 is that letter home, informing your parents with the responsible use policy or whatever guidelines you have at your school. Step 2 is creating class guidelines with your students for their behavior and responsibility in these spaces. And then step 3 is making that website. And Robin asked a really great question. What kind of prompts can you give when creating those class guidelines? For me, I have done it, I have to say I do it the same way every time because I really like it. There are a couple of really great public service announcements from the US, it's from like a cyberbullying organization, and they're really short videos, and they take face-to-face interaction and make it look like digital interaction. So there's one, it's called Think Before You Post, and a girl puts a picture on a bulletin board in the hallway in school, and everyone can take down a copy, and they take millions of copies. So if you give kids a prompt and talk about how they can be what that person in that video should have done or could have done to be more safe or responsible or respectful or whatever the case may be. So I like providing kind of really visual cues for kids to have a look at to discuss appropriate behavior. And if that doesn't work for you, and I'll link those videos in here too. I have a whole blog post about it, so I'll link that in the comments here so you can see that. If those videos don't work for you, your kids are not interested in watching those, whatever reason they're not relevant, you could just have the conversation with kids like, so what do you do when you're on your phone? What do you like about talking to people on your phone? What don't you like? And kind of just get their conversation going about things that have happened to them in their digital spaces, and then talk about how they can make those things better when they're making good choices. All right, so I've got first 3 steps. I have a 4th step, which is setting up some sort of student sharing platform. You could call it a blog, you could call it a portfolio, you could call it a website. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but the idea is that there is a space for students to share their learning journey, that they can post media, so like images and videos and sounds, and also text, and that they can reflect on this learning over time. The key, I think, that makes it really interesting and really engaging for parents is that there has to be a space for parents to be able to comment and share their thoughts and feedback on that student work. So in schools that I work at, I always try to make this some kind of blogging type platform. It might be a microblogging type platform, it might be an actual blog, it might be like a website that provides comments, but some way where people can actually interact with the content that is shared in those spaces. So this is basically a portal for student sharing. It's documenting their learning journey. And I think if you assign actual homework tasks for parents to look at what students are doing and comment on them, that's a really great way to engage parents in what their students are actually learning and kind of make it real for them. The really hard part about digital documentation of student work is that it's digital, and there's nothing kids are bringing home and showing their parents that we can stick on the refrigerator. It's just all kind of in the computer. So if you can find strategies for actually getting parents to sit down and look at the student learning and then kind of documenting that conversation, it's a really great way to get parents engaged and involved in what kids are doing. So the fifth step is kind of something that I feel like goes throughout all of these steps, but it's frequent reminders that you know what you're doing, right? You're confident, you know how to teach these digital citizenship skills, that those are going to be part of the learning experience. But perhaps even more importantly, that the academic elements of this unit are still the focus. I think it's really important to remember that as teachers and students, we may be more excited about the innovative learning opportunities that technology provides us than parents are. Because for parents, this is all really new. They didn't learn like this. They're not really sure, not all parents, but many parents are not really sure how or why this is valuable to their child's education. So while you can reassure them about the digital citizenship skills and talk about all those really critical skills that you're teaching throughout this process, they also just want to know that their child is learning the content that's really critical for them to learn, so that you can take opportunities frequently, as often as needed, to highlight and remind and reassure parents that not only is this super exciting and will be engaging for students and motivating and provide them with really important critical digital literacy skills, but it's also going to help them learn the content that's your class better, because it's giving them this authentic environment to both create, share, document, reflect, and collaborate on with their peers or perhaps global partners. So those are my 5 steps to helping parents understand your digital classroom. I'm just going to recap them really quickly for you because I'm under 12 minutes. The first one is sending a letter home with the responsible use policy so parents know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and what the expectations are. The second one is creating some class guidelines with your students so they are authentic and student-driven, and this would be primarily around behavior expectations. The third one is creating your teacher portal for whatever you're sharing with parents for documenting the learning journey. The fourth one is creating student learning portals, so that would be something individual for each student or maybe even for the whole class depending on the age group that you're working with. And then the fifth one is that kind of frequent reassurance to parents that academic skills like understanding how to read, for example, are the priority, and you're doing that through the technology tools that you provide while also teaching digital citizenship skills. Hopefully those 5 steps are helpful and useful for you. If you have further questions, please let us know because we want to keep making these really super relevant for you. Pop them in the comments and we will come back and add our feedback. I will also put that blog post in the comments for this. And the reason we're doing these videos is because we're super excited about these micro-credentials that we're launching. One of them is called the Connected Teacher. Another one is called the One-to-One Teacher. And both of those will be super relevant if you're a teacher who's really interested in connecting your class digitally. Both of those micro-credentials will help you go through all of the steps that you need to feel super confident and creative and excited about creating that connected classroom. So thank you so much for joining me today, and we will see you again here next week. Bye-bye.